Hi there, my name is Dean, and I'm very happy to welcome you to what I hope will be the first in a growing list of video tutorials that I plan on publishing. So why am I doing this? Well, I've always enjoyed sharing information with others, and I figure what better way to share that information than to create a YouTube channel where I can post future videos. I appreciate the support, so if you want to go ahead and hit the like button, or send me feedback in the comments section, or at dean@deanforint.com. I appreciate that. Also, if you wish to receive notifications of future videos, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, as that will allow you to get notifications every time I post new content. Anyway, enough of my rambling. Let's get on with the show. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to install a LAMP server on a local Linux machine. So LAMP stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And when they're installed together, they allow a web developer to have a local hosted environment that they can use to develop and test their web pages or web apps before they deploy them up on a live server. There's nothing more embarrassing than having a web page or web app on a live server only to discover that it's filled with bugs, errors, and other issues. So having a local environment eliminates that altogether, and it allows the web developer to make sure the web page or web app is working properly. So let's go ahead and get on with showing you how this is done. Okay, so we're in the Linux desktop right now, Linux Mint desktop. If you're on Ubuntu, it might look a little different. So, but like I said, the stuff's pretty much the same. So first thing what we're going to do is, before we install not only LAMP server but any major package, we just want to make sure that all our stuff is updated, especially the core Linux packages, but even third-party software that's installed. You should always make sure that stuff's updated before you install any major package. This way you eliminate the possibility of having installation errors due to out-of-date packages. That's happened to me in the past, and it's just good practice to make sure everything's up to date before you install any major package such as LAMP server. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's open a terminal window. Now, a lot of the commands that I'm going to be using here require elevated root privileges. And in order to do that, you have to type sudo in front of each command. There is a shortcut that I found you can do. Instead of typing sudo in front of each command you issue, you can do sudo -i. It's going to ask you for your password. Go ahead and type that in, and you'll notice that the prompt is changed to a red highlight, and it just says Dino rather than Dino@Dino. That indicates now that we are in root mode. So as long as you see the prompt that looks like this, you have a persistent root mode that you can use. And now when you type these commands, you don't have to type sudo each time. It just saves you a little typing. So let's go ahead and get our packages updated and do another one to upgrade to, just in case there's an upgrade that comes through, but probably shouldn't be. Now I'm not going to have any updates because I just had a fresh install of my virtual machine. I'm running on a virtual machine for this demo, so I just had everything upgraded before I recorded, but you may very well be different. You'll probably have packages to install, and depending on how many, this process could take quite a while. So let it start going, and probably a good time to go upstairs, get a, or wherever your kitchen is, and get a soda, tea, coffee, beer, whatever your preferred beverage is, because this will probably take a while, but to me it didn't. So, and once you're done, you'll come back to the command prompt again. It's red, so you have this elevated privileges. So let's go ahead and install our LAMP server. So apt.get. This time we want to do an install because we are installing the package. Yep, server. Okay. And then there's a little weird character at the end, little caret symbol. Don't forget that it's part of the package name for whatever reason, but it'll error if you don't put that in. Again, it's going to ask you to continue, and then it's going to kind of chug along, and in a few minutes it's actually going to ask you a question. Here it is. It's going to ask you if you want to set a password for the MySQL root user. It's not required, but it is recommended. I mean, I recommend it. I believe if you don't and you leave that field blank, it's the password for MySQL is not going to be changed. And I think by default, MySQL password, root password is nothing anyway. So it'll just, if you don't change the password here when you log into root, it'll be logging in root without a password. On a local machine, that's not too much of a big deal. But in a remote environment, I would suggest it's a very big deal to have a password on your root machine. And actually, for the sake of argument, I think you should just go ahead and put a password regardless, whether you're local or remote. So let's go ahead and do that. And we reconfirm it. And then it's just going to spin off and continue to install LAMP server. So this, again, this process will take a while. So go ahead and take a chug, sip, whatever on your beverage that you got a few minutes ago. Okay, so LAMP server is now installed. We're back at the prompt, and at this point you have a complete LAMP server installed. You can go ahead and serve out web pages and whatnot. So let's go ahead and actually no, we should restart our LAMP server. And then it will be so. Let's do CTL. And let's go ahead and restart Apache. Alright, now we want to do a status of Apache to verify that Apache is running, and we got a green light here and active running. This tells us that Apache server is running. Let's go ahead and do the same thing to verify that MySQL is running. Okay, again, we get green light and MySQL is active. So both Apache and MySQL are running. Now I also want to test if our PHP is running fine. So let's go ahead and create a simple PHP file, and we're going to place that in our root folder on Apache, which that's this var www.html. By default, that's the folder that Apache looks to serve out web pages. So if you, when you start creating web pages on this environment, you can, by default, you can throw them in that HTML folder and just use the index that .html that you create, just replace it with what the index that Apache has, and it should work fine. So let's do info PHP. Alright, so we got a text editor here, and we're just gonna enter PHP, my info, and close the PHP. Now, if you don't know any PHP, don't worry, that's not a big deal. This is just a simple one-line program. Basically, all it does is calls up the internal oh, actually, that's not even the right name. What did I do? Oh, I lost my full screen. Oh, I took this. Oh, get out of here. Yeah, okay. Oh, why did I do that? I'm like hitting back up it. Alright. I was hitting it. Alright, anyway. Back to regular programming. Alright, so we go PHP info. There, that's the right call. Alright, so that's PHP info is an internal PHP method that or function that returns a page that shows you all the environmental. Now you'll see it in a second, but it returns a page that shows you the environmental data that it was installed with PHP. It's just a good way to test if PHP is running. So yeah, okay. Close him out there. For some reason I took a screenshot. I don't know how that happened, but alright, so let's go and open up our browser. I'm using Chrome here, but you can use any browser you feel like using. And I get the first screen because, again, as I said, I have a fresh install on my virtual machine, so it's going to be run like this the first time. let's first test out our Apache page. And we get the Apache Splash screen. So if this shows up, it's another way of telling that Apache is running, because that's actually being served from the default web page, the default folder for Apache. Let's go ahead and verify that. Okay, so this is that page I was talking to you about. It is from the PHP info function. It returns this, and it's just a collection of environmental data that is installed when LAMP server installed PHP. It's just configured with this data. If you do develop any PHP pages, this is actually a good resource to come to when you're trying to figure out bugs. It gives you all the environmental data that is configured with PHP. But in this case, we are just making sure PHP is working. So just having this method being called on a page proves that PHP engine is working fine. So we can verify that we have a full LAMP server installed right now. And you can go ahead and serve pages on this. Like I said, if you serve the pages, you can go in to file system under the var and www HTML. Now this is the root folder inside of Apache. This is the default folder that Apache looks to when it serves out web pages. This is actually that splash screen that Apache uses. So if you do develop web pages, basically just create your index page and just replace your index HTML with this. This with your index HTML, and it'll work fine. And you can also, call up an individual like I called info.php after the local host. As long as that page is within this folder, it should work fine. Or if there's a subfolder, just make sure you put the subfolder. But that's basically how that is. Now, one thing is if you're doing any type of database programming, you can still use this as it is, but unless you're like me and you don't like typing a gazillion SQL commands in line, because right now, in order to use this as is, and you have a root, a database, you have to go into the console. I think I spelled that. You have to go into MySQL console, which that's what this is here, and you type all your commands through here. If you're good at doing that, go ahead. You can go ahead and get started. But if you're like me, and I'm a kind of a user interface type guy, I like having some sort of visual interface to maintain or manage MySQL. Well, we're in luck because we do have one. It's called PHP Myadmin, and let's go ahead and install that now. Actually, don't forget to put the install, because we're installing the package. And again, I'm on the root, so I don't have to put the sudo in front of everything, so because I have that persistent root access. Right, it's just gonna go ahead and run, and right here it's actually asking you which server you want to use. Let's go ahead and do Apache 2 by default, and it's gonna just go along and continue running, and over time it's going to ask you another question as to whether you want to keep let PHP install the default database or do it manually. Okay, so we're back, and we have this prompt here, and basically what this prompt says is if PHP needs a default database to be configured before it can be used. You can optionally handle this automatically to let PHP configure it automatically, or if you're an advanced user and you have an existing configuration from a previous PHP Myadmin install, you can use that as well. I'm going to, because this is a fresh install, we're just going to go ahead and hit, and make sure I'm focused here, hit yes. And we're going to provide a password, because it actually needs to set up a user account for that database. So in order to set that account up, it needs a password. you don't have to enter it. If you leave it blank, it's going to generate a random password. And for the most part, when we're managing our MySQL, we're probably going to be managing through the local, the root user. So we're probably never going to log into this user. So you can either enter a password or let it generate a random one. I don't see us using it in the future, but if you plan on using it, go ahead and create a password that you wish to remember. So I'm just going to go ahead, for the sake of argument, create a password, reconfirm it. Alright, so it's going to continue to go along and finish up our install. Okay, so our install is all set and done. We're back at the prompt and we have PHP Myadmin configured. Now there's one other thing we need to do before we can access PHP Myadmin. We have to actually tell the Apache server that it exists, because PHP Myadmin was not part of the original LAMP server package. I don't know why they don't put it in, but they should. But it's not in there, so we actually have to tell Apache that we have PHP Myadmin and we want to use that within Apache. So there's one of two ways of doing this, and actually let me go over my notes. Two ways of doing this. There is one way is to create a relative link in the default web folder on Apache and it point into the PHP shared folder. That's one way of doing it, and I'll show you how to do that. We'll create this relative link in the default web server folder. So we're going to link ln-s user share. Right, so you put that link, you put that command in, and it'll create a relative link in the default HTML path to point to the PHP Myadmin configuration in the shared folder. That's one way to do it. I prefer, and you can do either way, it doesn't matter. The way I prefer doing it is actually just physically add in the PHP configuration file within the Apache configuration folder altogether. So the way to do that is etc-php copy to etc. Everything's about right. PHP Apache. Yeah, it looks right. Alright, so and that's all set. Now what we want to do is want to configure PHP Myadmin. Okay. And then one last, I know it says reload here, but I always like to restart. And restart will pretty much just reload anyway, so go ahead and restart our Apache. Okay, so now if we go over to our web browser and we localhost and then we do PHP Myadmin. Alright, so we have the login screen for PHP Myadmin. Login as root, and enter the root password that we created way back in the configuration of LAMP. And we have a graphical interface now that we can use to maintain our databases. We can add databases here. We can set up user accounts. There's that PHP Myadmin, that when PHP Myadmin was created, that's that user that it told you, okay, we got to create a user. Do you want to name a password? That's that user. The database, PHP Myadmin, this is the one that it's telling you we got to create, so that's that. You can do all kinds of things here. You can import, export, you get settings, that. stuff, stuff like that. So this is a really pretty good user interface to maintain or manage your MySQL databases. So if you're doing any database web app type stuff, you have a good way of managing your databases from this. Now there is one caveat that is relatively new to this, because before, like as you saw here, I had no problem logging into PHP Myadmin with my root account. But I guess in MySQL version 5.7 and beyond, and I'm not sure what build, because I do have 5.7 build, I believe 24 on MySQL, and I was able to log in fine. But I guess there's newer versions of MySQL server that they put a restriction on logging in to root, that needs to be, anytime you log into MySQL as root, you have to have elevated privileges, thus that sudo command. Because we log into PHP Myadmin via a website, a URL, there's really no way of issuing the sudo commands there. So the one way around this, and like I said, this install now, I recorded this back in December 2018. I had no problem, but if you're watching this a year into the future or 2 years into the future, that might be an issue. So I'm just going to show you how to get around this now. What you want to do is we want to create a separate user in MySQL console, and we're going to grant that user with root privileges or all privileges. So let's go ahead and log into our MySQL console. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to create user, name it anything, doesn't matter. I'm going to name mine Dean_DB user, @ get localhost, and we're going to identify by make a password. Obviously you don't want to use this password, I'm just putting this in there for the sake of a demo. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to grant, get down my notes here, grant all privileges on all databases to our user at localhost. Now don't forget these quotes that in between of these, the name and the actual host. That's important. With grant option. Okay, make sure you always end with a semicolon. Alright, and the last thing we want to do is flush the privileges. Alright, so now we have a user created with all privileges, that essentially that user becomes the root user. It's got pretty much the same access that root has. Let's go ahead and close our terminal here, and let's log out PHP Myadmin. I'm going to demo. I want to log back in. I want to log back in with my DB user. And okay, so now we're back in the user, back in PHP Myadmin with that user that we created. We have all our functionality, all our privileges. We can create databases. We can set up accounts. You see the root accounts is here. All privileges. So I have the same privileges as root. So essentially, this user becomes the root account. Like I said, it's something new that MySQL had put in, and it's actually a pretty good idea. It's really, I don't know, there's an argument to be said for using root accounts or not. Well, I don't know. It's as long as I guess as long as you have a secure password, I don't see any issue with it. Well, some people say, oh, you can't use a root account. Oh, as long as the password's secure and it's good, then that's fine. But they have a restriction on root now that you have to use this, elevated privileges to access root. Maybe there is some sort of exploit out there that exploits it, but anyway, that's going to be the future of PHP Myadmin. You're not going to be able to put the root user within the login screen, and this is the way to get around it. So that's it in a nutshell. This is pretty much it. We have a full version of LAMP server that we can put our local web pages on. Again, like I said, this is set up as a single site environment, and anytime you want to go ahead and edit web pages, this is the folder you want to use by default. A future video I'm going to show you how to create multiple web pages. I think that's going to be my next video in the coming days. I'm going to show you how to create multiple websites using virtual host and Apache. That's a more likely scenario, so it's an important one to cover. I'm going to go ahead and cover that, and I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you do, hit the like button, and also if you have comments, suggestions, or otherwise, go ahead and enter some comments in the comments field, or send me an email directly at dean@deanforit.com. Also, if you wish to subscribe to my webpage, and you can wish to subscribe to the channel, you can receive notifications every time I post a new video, which I hope to be doing quite frequently. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate it. I appreciate the likes. I appreciate the feedback. And feel free to share the word. Tell others that I'm out here to help you. And that's it. We got a full working version of LAMP server, and you can go ahead and have fun with it. Okay, so happy coding.